Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Projectkin project recipe event. I think of these as really the premier events for us each month. And today we have a very special speaker in Carrie Carney, who is in our elite two-timer club, presenting here as Projectkin. Joining us, I'll mention, as Anna Schutz, who is also a two-time presenter. We are always delighted to see active, engaged members come back and tell their own stories of their own projects, and that's what makes these project recipe events so special. I have a few firm requirements on how we go about doing these project recipes. It has to be a project someone actually did. Just talking about it is not good enough. Talking about it is wonderful. It's brainstorming. It's what we do in our project clinics. And it's amazing to me how many times ideas that are kicked around in project clinics turn into project recipes, either because someone got inspired and went and did something, or they heard about it and said, you know what, I did that. And then come into a project recipe event to share how they did it. Because going through the specifics of it helps really understand what we do every time we create, which is make choices of things we won't do, things we aren't going to do, pathways we're not going to take in order to do one thing. And that results, in my view, in not only a wonderful creative product, a creative thing that is at the end of your project, but also the insight shared in our community with recipes to explain why you made the choices you did. And sometimes, I know this is true for me, sometimes they're what choices I wish I had made. The other ideas and things. And one of the things that we've come to really appreciate from Carrie, as we saw in her program in October about creating a child's learning ebook, was her extensive discussion in the notes about things to really think about and appreciate. And I think that's something very special in how she goes about it. Now, I've had a little preview of this talk, and it is on the longer side, which is perfectly fine because it's good stuff. And you are all welcome. I will keep this recording as tightly as possible to an hour, and then turn the recording off, and you're all very welcome to stay for what we call the after party, where people can just relax and enjoy the conversation. And then, of course, we can also take conversation online when I share the recording in our community at the Projectkin forum. So with that, I'm going to step off of this little soapbox and invite Carrie Carney to take away the presentation. Go ahead, Carrie.
I'm ready to take it away. So I actually did this project, so I qualify to present here today. And the strange and kind of funny thing about it is the idea came to me when Barbara first started talking about doing project recipes for Projectkin. And I didn't understand that she was talking about what we're doing here. I had recipe in my head. And so it sent me off on this tangent of, well, what does it look like if we gather family recipes, and how does that tell our stories, and so on and so forth. And so it's kind of a quirky little way that I got started with this, but it became a really important project for our family. So I'm super excited to get to share it with you guys here today. So I love quotes, so I always go and look for what is the meaning and what I'm doing. And this was I'm a researcher. And this is a research study I found on cooking and family relationships, and so I just wanted to open with it. And she has 3 quotes that I pulled. This one is, cooking supports family relationships, whether cooking for others, being fed by others cooking, or cooking together. It's nurturing at its most fundamental. And then she says, food is very much a weaving together of our identity as a family. And then in her study, she had collected data related to food and families. And I loved one of the participant quotes. She said, I feel a lot closer to my family's side to my father's side because of all the recipes they've passed down through the family, as well as other family cultural things. And what I didn't include here is that she goes on to say that her mother's side of the family didn't save recipes from generation to generation, and she feels more disconnected from them than she does her father's side of the family that had passed down these recipes that came from previous generations. And so I thought that really kind of spoke to what we do here, which is the family storytelling and passing on the generational tidbits and wisdom and those kinds of things. So here is sort of what I did. Now, if you were in the October session that I did on children's books, then you may recognize the cover of this recipe book, because this cover is an artist's rendering that was done for the same daughter's book that I wrote about her origin story. And so I want to point that out because of the connection here. So I'm pulling through from her child's book that she's very attached to into what I've created now in a cookbook for her. My youngest is a tremendous cook and has been that way since she was little. She just loves it. It's in her genetics, and she does not get that from me. I'm adequate in the kitchen. She gets that from some of the women that are generations back in our family. But she's not as interested in the family stories. And so what I really wanted to do here is gather together a bound book of recipes for her that came down through our family or were a part of our family. But it was important to me for her to understand who they came from and how they had served our family. It's not just a recipe, but it was the recipe that yada, 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 that so-and-so created, and it was always used, and how it was embedded in our family stories. And then I'm a photographer in a past life, and so family photos are super, super important to me, and I wanted to be able to bring people's faces and stories alive through this. So that's kind of what I've talked about here, the past and the present, approachable for my daughter. Again, if you were with me in October, you know that I have a big soapbox about how families are constructed and how we conceive of families. And so my daughter, it's for her. And even though I knew other people were going to be getting it, I dedicated it to her. And therefore, I really wanted to honor those people that she considered to be her family. So let's get into how this worked. So if you want to do a family cookbook, there's some things I would definitely recommend that you do, as partly based upon my skinned niece, but really the starting place, of course, is the recipes themselves. So some things that I kind of began to ask myself and others, what recipes are your family favorites? And whatever your favorites are, where did those come from? Like, what is the story behind them? What's in the boxes that were given to you whenever someone passed away in your family or did not want family memorabilia? We may have them sitting, and I know Kathy Stone works extensively on this, but you may have boxes stashed in a closet somewhere that you're assuming are all photographs and other sorts of memorabilia, and they may be, but you may find that there's some recipes stuck in there too. So dig into the boxes. I actually found my grandmother's cookbook in a box that had been given to me by my family. And so it had the cookbook, but then she had stashed additional recipes in between the pages. And she had also taped recipes onto the pages. And so that was a big find for me in terms of recipes for my family. And then once you begin to get those recipes and the things that go along with them, and the things are the stories that go with them, the origins of them, then you want to get your electronic folders set up and begin to scan them. Now, I believe I say this in a minute, but I'm going to maybe say it a couple of times. Start scanning immediately, because for me, there's nothing more intimidating to have a huge stack of stuff that I need to scan. And if you'll simply scan and make electronic what you receive as you receive it and file it, in, by the cook's name, or however you plan to organize your book, this will go a lot better for you and not begin to feel overwhelming at some point. So you're gathering recipes that you have access to, and then you're going to want to map your targeted family members. So who is it that you intend to have as a part of your book? So people could make all different sorts of decisions with this. You could decide to do just one side of a family, perhaps. Maybe there are ethnic differences between one side and the other, and you want to maybe do two different cookbooks that really honor the ethnicity and the recipes that come from those families. You could say that you only want to stay within direct family members, or you could say that you want to cast your net wider than that. I mean, there's a lot of decisions to be made about who you want to include in the cookbook. So second cousins, third cousins, does it matter how they're related to you? What about the spouses that marry into the family? Are those included too? All those decisions kind of get made, and I actually sort of mapped, like I'm a visual person, so I sort of drew out a map of listing the people and their connections and figuring out who I wanted to include. Then who's still living? Because of course, as you go back on your family history, not everyone's going to be, right? And so the next question is, who is still living and may provide you access to members of your family who are not living? So as you've mapped everything, like my great grandparents, have passed away, but I know who their children are and who their children's spouses are and who the grandchildren are, so that I can begin to kind of figure out, well, who might have a recipe from my great grandmother, even though she is no longer alive. And then who do you have contact information, and who do you need to track down? Now, if your family is like mine, I've got some family members that I'm in constant contact with, and I've got others that, are somebody that I've heard about since I was young, but for whatever reason, I'm not in contact. I have an unfortunate legacy in my family where we have incidents of where family has been cut off. And so as I was raised, there were parts of my family that existed, but like I have an uncle that I've never met. And so you really have to kind of sit with this and think about, where are these people, and do I have contact information for them? And if I don't, who might be able to provide me contact information? And so it's really kind of a mapping project of figuring out the who that is a part of what you want to do in your project. Then you've gathered your recipes, you've mapped who it is that you want to include, or that's important to you, at least as a starting place. So now you begin to contact the people that were on your map that you really want to gather recipes for. So I started easy. I contacted living family members first and said, here's what I'm doing for Bella. Do you have family recipes that are important for your nuclear family that you have cooked a lot and are favorites? And do you have recipes that were given to you by your parents, your grandparents, your cousins, so on and so forth? And if so, will you send those to me? Will you share and contribute to this book? Now, the important thing that I learned, fortunately, I learned it pretty early on, is I was so focused on capturing the recipes, I forgot to do the important part of capturing the memories that go with the recipes. And so I actually did a second round with the living members to say, okay, now that you've given me your recipes, I'm back. I learned, and it became easier as I went on, to say, I'd like to have the recipe. If you have photos of where, of the person that this recipe came from, I would love to have those. And any stories you have. And I don't care if you just hit the record on your phone and send me audio is great. If you want to jot it down on a piece of paper, you don't need to scan it. Just take a picture of it with your phone. I mean, like, I don't care how it gets to me. If you want to tell me, I'll get on a phone call with you and record. It doesn't matter to me, whatever's easiest for you. So that's kind of how I approached it. Living family members, who else do they have for their family? Who else do they have recipes from? Any photos they have that would be related, and the stories that are related. Now, I found that there were some people that were like, well, yeah, this was grandma's recipe. This is who she is. Here's a photo of her. But I had to still go back and say, okay, but how do you remember this recipe? When was this food served? Okay, so it was served at Thanksgiving. Okay, so can you tell me about a story that occurred at Thanksgiving that really you've carried forward with you in your life that was important to you, where this food was served? And so I found that people didn't always just naturally share kind of what I was looking for. I had to go back and kind of probe a little bit. But once I got them going, I would just get random emails sometimes of somebody that said, "Oh, wait, I thought of another story and I want to get this to you." And so people became helpful as they began to understand what it was I was really looking for. Now, one thing that I didn't originally plan for, but became very much a part of my process, is that I didn't account for the fact that my family came from rural areas. And so there were home economics cookbooks that had family recipes in them. Well, I didn't account for that. But once I got onto that, then it was like, whoa, okay, now we're rocking, because now I can pull recipes that were published by either, a lot of times they were newsletters that the home economics programs would send out, and I was able then to get family recipes from them. The other thing that happened to me is that sometimes it was actually a close friend that had the recipe, not the family member. And so I was going back and working my map for, I remember that my Aunt Evelyn's best friend was, so-and-so, who would have so-and-so's information, because Aunt Evelyn had all boys and they're not cooks. And so they don't have anything, but you know what? Her best friend did. And so you really have to kind of think broadly about where might these recipes and stories and photos be sitting, and who might they be sitting with. You guys stop me at any time, because I know we've got a long one and I'm moving fast, so feel free to stop me. Now, here's another thing that I kind of became a problem to solve for me, is that for my children, they recognize a lot of recipes as mine. Like, that's mom's recipe. But it wasn't actually my recipe. It was, in a lot of cases, it was my mother's recipe, their grandmother's, but they knew it as mine. Well, I didn't want to, in the cookbook, put it as mine, because even though I had cooked it for my children, that's not its origins. And so I wanted to find a way to be able to acknowledge that in the cookbook, and this is how I chose to do it. I took this uh, piece, this visual that was actually in Canva, and I put it by my name in the contents, which I'll show you in just a minute, to identify for my children recipes that they grew up eating and they recognized from our family, but were showing up in other ancestors' sections. So this is an example. This is one of my mother's recipes that my children grew up eating this. And so it is set up as my mother's recipe in the book, but because that visual is stamped there, my children know, oh, that's the breakfast casserole that we ate growing up. It just came from Grammy. And so that's how I chose to do it throughout the book, so that my children know whenever it's a recipe that their palates recognize. It wasn't just an old recipe from grandma that they've never eaten before. So I was really surprised sometimes at who got involved, and frankly, who didn't get involved in this project, because I think everyone should love family history, and everyone should be just bowled over by getting involved. But strangely enough, there were some people who didn't. But anytime that somebody wanted to get involved, I embraced that big time, because they were a huge, huge help. I didn't spend a lot of time sitting. Well, I had one cousin that I was really offended by, but I found out later he was in the midst of a divorce, and that was a lot of his reaction to my request. But for the most part, I didn't really sit very long with people who were not responsive, because I knew this was my project for my daughter. They have their own kids, whatever. And so I just would find a way to go around them. So if I was looking for Aunt Cassie's recipe and her children were not responding to me, I would just go to her sister or I would go to her sister's kids. And so it's just kind of a family network thing that you just try to keep figuring out how to get at the person's recipes that you're trying to get at, and not continue to bug people that, you know, don't seem to be interested. But I did, I had a super special thing happen that I'll just mention here, in that I have my mother's cousins. There's been three of them, and one of them died, and one of them I've stayed in contact with over the years. But her brother, of course, I knew him, but I probably was around him maybe 2 or 3 times max when we were growing up. But I knew how to contact him. And so I really wanted to give people who wanted to write stories about their parents and their grandparents the opportunity to do that, and it not just be in my voice. And so I contacted him and said, you know, I've got the section for Aunt Corrine, which was his mother, and I need to still write the stories about her. Would you be willing to share some of your memories of her cooking and being in the kitchen? And he said, oh, absolutely. Now, this guy is a finance guy, and he's a big, important finance guy. Like, I kind of felt intimidated contacting him, to be honest. But he was super warm. He would get back to me overnight with stuff and send me stuff. And he actually ended up being the family member. He said, I'm pretty good with a red pen. And so he's one of the family members who actually proofread all 172 pages, and he did it overnight. Like, it was amazing to me. It was huge. Now, I have not had an ongoing relationship with him, but I'm in contact with him now. And the really cool part is his daughter, whom I've never met, is really into family history. And so he wanted a copy of the cookbook for his daughter. And I said, well, you've certainly earned that. And so I sent one to his daughter. Well, now I'm in contact with her, which is a cousin of mine, that I had never met before. Did not know anything about her, and she's now providing stuff to me for the second edition of this cookbook. And so it's an organic process of reconnecting with family that was unexpectedly a blessing that I didn't really plan for. That was super special. Again, keep up with your scanning and filing. It gets overwhelming. If you need to pause and collecting stuff to catch up, do it. Anytime you have a handwritten recipe, scan the handwritten recipe, because they can provide these fabulous visuals in your cookbook that really are tied directly to the person. Now, my sister-in-law would kill me for doing this, but she knows me. She knows no one is safe with me. So this is a page out of her her section of the cookbook. These actually are both of my sister-in-laws, but the one on the left is married to my husband's brother, and she is she is a cooking mess. Like, she is a great cook, but you walk into her kitchen and every surface is covered with something. The refrigerator door may be sitting open. I mean, it is just the most extraordinary thing I've ever seen. And we got invited to her family's Thanksgiving one year, and we went, and I learned where she got it from. Her mother cooks that way. But it is just this massive, it looks like a tornado has come through. So this is one of the recipes that you sent me, and I included it as a visual because look at the mess. Like, it's had all sort of stuff poured on top of it where you can barely even read it. And it's so uniquely my sister-in-law that I included the visual of it in the cookbook because it's so representative of her and how she is truly as a cook. Cookbook format. I did not create my format from scratch. That would have probably done it for me right there. I actually went on to Etsy and was surprised to find that there were Canva templates out in Etsy, and I bought one for like $10. I found one I liked. I bought it for like $10. They tell you how to download it into Canva. It worked beautifully, and because Canva is Canva, I was able to change colors. I was able to change layouts of pages, but I had a place to start from. I wasn't looking at a blank page, and that was really important for me because this is a lot of work, and having a pattern to start from was huge. So that's how I started. Something I did not account for, and I don't know why I didn't, I just wasn't thinking, is I'm in Canva and I'm using the page sizes that came in the template, right? Because I bought a template. Well, here's the thing. That doesn't necessarily mean your printer is going to print that size of page. And so I was doing a last minute adjustment between what was in my fully now at 172 pages file in Canva and it not matching the printer that I was going to use. And so that was a whole thing I had to do of adapting page sizes. So definitely figure out who you want your printer to be and what size you want your pages to be first, early, so that as you create and work with the recipes in the format of your cookbook, it's going to work together and you're not going to be scrambling at the end. Now, I used Blurb. I only know about Blurb because of Barbara. But I went out there. I really liked what I was finding out there. It felt good to me, like they were going to be easy to work with, and they were. They were fabulous to work with. And they could accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. So one thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to be sure that the paper in my book was high quality, but that it could be easily written on. I didn't want it to be coated. Now, some of you may want coated because stuff gets spilled on it, right? I didn't want coated because I saw this first edition as one step, right? And I wanted people to be able to continue to write on the pages and to add new recipes to the actual books so that later when I do another edition, I could pull all of that together. So for me, I wanted the pages to be writable, and Blurb could do that for me, but in a really high quality page. They also printed hardback, and they also would do a book that would lay completely flat. You know, the photo books that when you open them, you don't get that weird sort of bump in the middle. They lay flat. Okay. So Blurb could do all of that. And so I really recommend that you pause and take time to find the right printer that's going to be able to do the right thing for you and figure out what your page size is going to be early in your process. Then you need to decide how you're going to organize your cookbook. Now, for me, my focus was not on Italian food, you know, Mexican food, that kind of stuff. That was not my focus. Nor was my focus on main dishes, desserts, and salads. That was not, I was really highly focused on the family part of this. And so my cookbook is organized by cook. And it doesn't matter what kind of food or what kind of recipes they provided to me, it is organized by cook in their section. Now, that still gets complicated because you know how family trees are, you know how they expand. And so what I ended up doing, and again, this is for my daughter, is I separated it by her grandparents' lines. And so the first half of the cookbook is my mother's line. I'm sorry, I said that all wrong. Stop that. If we could pause the recording, we would. Okay, so my mother's and my dad's lines are combined together in the first half of the book, okay, which is my daughter's grandparents on maternal side. And the second half of the book is her dad's, my husband's, her paternal line, organized and by their generations. So it's two halves, my half, my husband's half for my daughter, and then by generation within each of those halves. Did that make sense? I'm sorry I messed that up. Okay. All right. So that's how mine is. So that means that the very last person in the cookbook with recipes is my daughter, because it all comes together then at her, which was intentional. Now, because there are people in the book that have passed away that my daughter never knew, and because we have these weird breakages in my family, that some of the people living she's never heard of, but they're part of our family and I wanted to include them. It meant she was going to get confused really fast when she started trying to track through the generations. And so I put a partial family tree at the beginning of the book. It's really kind of embedded between the contents, the actual contents, and when the recipes start. And it is not a full family tree. It doesn't map our entire family tree. It's a family tree of the cooks that are included in the cookbook. and their sort of immediate people. So like if Aunt Sherry is in there, and she is, Uncle John does not have a recipe in there, but he's Aunt Sherry's, I mean, that's the aunt and uncle set. And so Uncle John is included in that too. And then it has a note in there that says this is the maternal side of the family tree. It only includes the Cooks and their immediate people from the maternal line. For a full family tree, yada, 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 okay, which is not in this book. Then I also included, as really a table of contents, a list of the Cooks in order. So they're listed maternal line first by generation, then paternal line by generation. And each one of those has a little picture of them and a brief discussion for my daughter, a brief description for my daughter about how they're related to her. Now, these weird white blocks, I'm sorry, I felt kind of uncomfortable giving out full names of my family. And so I blocked them out, but obviously those are not there in the actual cookbook. And so, and I've put a note here at the front end of mine. This cookbook includes the cooks that you claim as family. So this is your constructed family. Together they sketch where you came from and how you crafted your now. Each person is a precious gift. Honor and care for these bonds, for they are proven ones. And I know you'll be brilliant in building more family and expanding this cookbook through those ties. And so this is sort of a living document for our family, knowing that we're going to continue to expand it. So Grandma Clifton is my great-grandmother. And you'll see that I've explained here that she was Grammy's, which is my daughter's grandmother. She was Grammy's maternal grandmother. So her mother's mother and her great-grandmother. So I've really been pretty meticulous in explaining the connection back to my daughter. So my daughter's heard of Grandma Clifton, but she hasn't heard of Aunt Nettie, who was of the same generation. That was her Grammy's, so my daughter's grandmother's paternal great aunt, and she also served as a second mother to my daughter's grandmother. So I'm already in these beginning to sort of embed a little bit of the family history, just sort of a bite of it, but it lets my daughter flip back to the front of the book and have both a verbal explanation as well as the family tree to understand these connections back to her. And there's about 3 or 4 pages of contents by Cooks that just continues to step through the generations of our family. Then I included a title page. As I said, each cook had their own section. And so this is what a title page looks like in our book. So Grammy Schultz is my mother, so my daughter's grandmother. And Grammy has more than just these 5 recipes because a lot of my recipes come from my mother. She has a couple of pages of contents, but this is how it starts. And you'll see here that there's very little organization in terms of how the recipes are organized within the section. They're just kind of grouped there. They're just kind of grouped there. But each one of them has a title page. And each one of them, again, weird white blocks, so sorry about that. But each one of them has a page that follows the title page that gives up here their full names, and I included maiden names to help my child make those connections. So it has both, it's actually Gladys, then her middle name, her last name, and then I never know how to say it. You guys will say, but the N-E-E accent, you know, that indicates maiden name, then that is there with the maiden name. Now, this white block right here is birth date and death date. So each one of them has the years of their life there at the top. And then this right here begins the memories that were shared with me. Now, my mother's name is Barbara, and she was thrilled out of her mind. She was extremely close to her grandmother, and she was thrilled out of her mind for me to say, I'm not going to write anything for Grandma Clifton, you write it. And so she wrote the stories for her grandmother, and I ended up, you guys, with pages of story that go in my genealogy stuff with family history that came only from asking her to write stories for this page. But she, in writing them, came up with all these stories that she wanted to share. It was a gold mine. Now, here on the right, this was also, again, to help my daughter. This is simply a mapping of the direct line to my daughter. So this is my great-grandmother. This is my grandmother, my mother, me, and my daughter. And so it's a lift out of the family tree that says, this cook is related to you through this. And then I put in the numbers. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because I was able to get recipes for 5 generations. And then these white blocks are, again, birth and date dates. It's giving their lifespan across this little diagram. I included a picture on each one. This is my daughter's. And what I tried to do, and let me go back for just a minute. This one is older, but what I tried to do is find a picture of the cook that was roughly in their early 20s. And I tried to stay as consistent as I could across the cookbook of having that original picture be from about the same time in life. Now, my great-grandmother, I wasn't able to do that. She was older here. She was already a mother here. But this is actually my daughter's page. So this is the last set of recipes in the book. And you see here, she's a senior in high school right now. And so I ranged in my pictures on this particular page from about 18 to 22 is kind of the range I tried to stay in, because it was fun for her then to see what each one of those ancestors look like at a common time in life. And then I wrote her piece for here. And then these are pictures of her, you know, as a child. And then I wanted to show you, because it looks kind of funny, there's just one dot here because we are ending the tree for now at her, but I expect later that, you know, she will have children or my other kids will have children, and we'll continue to expand that. Now, I, as I said, was a photographer. I'm our family keeper of all things like that. And so I wanted to show you one of the actual recipe pages. Now, some of the recipe pages, the recipes are complicated enough that there's not much space for other things on the page. This one is an exception. This is a sandwich loaf that I've made 100 times in my house. And so you see that it's been marked so that my kids recognize this is the one they've eaten, but it's in my mother's section. And I've set up here, growing up, my mom, which is her Grammy, usually made this to eat after church and after church on Christmas Eve. In family Carney, though, which is my family, we have it anytime we want to. And I use pepper jack cheese instead of Swiss. So I have my mother's actual recipe here, but I've noted the modification that I've made that my daughter's going to be familiar with. And then these are my parents. And then my mother and my older sister. And then this is me right here and my older sister and my parents. And so I've embedded family pictures on here, and my daughter is just carried away with them because these are her grandparents in high school. And she's not going to sit and look at a photo album, but she's going to look at a cookbook. And I've gotten kind of stuck in there to where she's also seen the family photos. Then you need to do an introduction written by you that tells about what the project is, why it is that you're doing, and how it's involved, because this is a huge project. And it's going to take a lot of you. A lot of you is going to be embedded in a project like this. And if you're working with other family members, a lot of them it's going to be embedded. And so write an introduction. And then I also, as I mentioned earlier, I included blank pages at the back of the book. And everybody who has one has been told, write those recipes down, because as you develop more favorite recipes in your family, get those things written down back there in the back. And at some point then I'm going to be asking for you to send me pictures of those for a second edition. So this was at Christmas on a train with my daughter. This is my daughter, and this is the introduction I wrote. And it just tells her, you know, she knows that this is the role that I play in our family, and I've said that. And then I said, you know, the dinner table is a rich history of bonding. I contacted our relatives near and far to gather the recipe. Some are generational recipes passed down over 2 or 3 generations. Others are likely going to become generational recipes as we go forward. They're favorites of current families, but for right now, they're just simply some families' favorites. I thank the people that worked with me and contributed to this. And then I wanted to make it clear, because my daughter's young, she's only 17, that this is not just a cookbook. It's a family heirloom, something to keep and for her to pass down to the next generation, just like I'm doing for her. So I'm sort of passing the mantle to her of, you know, I'm doing this for now, but this is going to become your responsibility for your children and your grandchildren. And then in this book, you're going to find a hint of each person's personality through the food they consider the best. And some are going to bring back memories for you. And then she's getting ready to leave home. She's my last one to leave home. And she's the one that has shared the kitchen with me. And so I've said, I've loved sharing a kitchen with you. And then this is what the blank recipe cards look like in the back. Again, I printed my book on paper. It's semi-coated, it's semi-protected, but it's very easy to write on so that it can be written on. Now, photographer, love family photos. I still didn't have enough space for all the family photos. I wanted to be sure we're included. And I have 2 children that are not cooks. So they didn't have their own sections in there. And I felt really funny about doing a family cookbook that they weren't included in. And so these are examples. There's not a lot of these. There's probably maybe 5 pages total that are just pictures, but I've included them in there because I knew that they were something that was going to be special for my daughter. So like for my aunt that I could never find any recipes for her, but I'm still working on it. I included her in photos of just family photos because I wanted her to be in the book. And this is my brother-in-law right here. And his wife has a section in the book, but he doesn't. But my kid's real tie is to him. And so I've included a page of photos that include him because he's a great uncle and he used to come to the kids' stuff. So then you've got everything, you've got the stories. And again, I really encourage you not to write all the stories yourself, but people are thrilled, especially if it's someone who's deceased, to have the opportunity to write the page that talks about who they were as a person and how they want them to be remembered. Once you've got all of that, you're going to be ready to start putting it together. Now, here's the bad news. You're going to be typing a lot of these recipes because even when you've got a scanned copy of them, as you saw with my sister-in-law, they're not necessarily readable. And I also found that sometimes there were ingredients in older recipes that there's no way my daughter's going to understand. Things were called, okay, so here's a good one for you. I have a grandmother that had salad dressing in her recipes. Well, so my daughter's thinking, well, Italian or, ranch or like, okay. So I had to explain what salad dressing was in that generation. And so you're going to find yourself keyboarding a lot of this. If you've got somebody who likes to key and is willing to do that, farm it out. I keyed all of my own, and then you're going to add the stories and the photos that you've gathered. You're going to write your intro and any other important pages, assess what is still missing, and then follow up. Now, I have a sister, the sister that I was really, really close to, who is deceased. And there was no way I was putting a cookbook out without her in it. I was able to find her cookbook in the boxes that I took from her house. Then I wrote, and for me, there's several pages in there for me because my children have never known my sister and I was really close to her. So I used this opportunity to embed things about her that they wouldn't necessarily, already know. So you want to think about those special things that based upon your family history and your family stories may need something special from you that is more than just kind of your standard piece. Oh, the proofreading. The proofreading is massive in this. Remember, you've keyed a lot of this. And so there are going to be errors out the wazoo in your cookbook. Proofread. Who else can proofread? My best friend was pressed into service. Like, you still want me in your life, you got to proofread the family cookbook. And she did. Like I said, my mother's cousin, high-end financial guy, he proofread the book. I probably proofread it. I don't even know how many times I proofread it. Errors still are in the book. I mean, that's the bottom line. It still has errors in it. And my funniest one, my mother-in-law, bless her little soul, I am not at all what she ordered because I'm sort of, this. And that whole family is engineers. My husband is an engineer. And so she was wonderful about helping me gather stuff. And she was wonderful about when she got the cookbook, texting me every single error she found in the printed book. And so I was so grateful to her for her service. I wish I had asked her before I printed it, and I will next time. But I've marked all of those in my book so that in the second edition, those can be corrected. And then what I did is I printed up a little kind of gift card in the books that I gave to people, and I wrote on it, "There's errors in this book. It is part of the flavor and vibe of our family. Enjoy it. Let me know when you find them. I'll correct it in the next one." I mean, I was just right out there with it. This is a cookbook that has errors in it, and everybody's been fantastic about it. Now, one of the things that slipped through that my mother-in-law pointed out was that in her fudge recipe, which is a famous fudge recipe in our family, I had typed 16 ounces of chocolate chips instead of 6 ounces. So we're in an ongoing negotiation about whether that really matters or if that was an error that is a good thing in the cookbook, because it certainly makes it much more chocolatey. So deciding on your printing details, hopefully you have heard me and you chose your printer before you started putting your book together. So you know who you're working with. You're going to want to decide whether you want to do a hard book, bound book, whether you're wanting to do a soft cover book, whether you want to do a book that lays completely flat, or whether that matters to you. Thinking about paper, and again, as I've said several times, that sounds crazy, but it was really an important decision, and you want to think about that in terms of protecting the book versus people being able to write in it. And then you're really down to working with your printer to get your file uploaded. And again, I used Canva, although there are certainly other things that you can use, but getting it uploaded into their format and into their processes in doing the work that you need to do to actually do the printing. Now, one of the things that I liked about Blurb is that these cookbooks, here's the thing that happens. People are willing to kind of contribute in the beginning because, oh, Carrie's doing something great for her kid. But when they really realize what it is, they'll want a copy of it. Okay. Now, this is not an inexpensive project, folks, not in terms of your time, and also not definitely in terms of the printing, because these are custom books. Well, I would love to be in a financial position to be able to buy a book for everyone, but we are not. It would have been into the thousands of dollars to be able to do that for as many people as were involved. And so it was important to me for people to be able to access a copy of it should they want to do that, but not a copy that I had to pay for all of them. And so Blurb allowed me to set up the cookbook in what is essentially a marketplace. And you can choose whether or not it is a public or private. So I kept mine private because there's a ton of family information in the cookbook and I didn't want it out in the public domain. But it has a direct link that I could then share with family members. It's not out in the public domain, but they can go in and they can purchase however many times they want to, as many copies as they want to. So I really appreciated that opportunity with Blurb. It really solved a problem for me. This is what it looks like listed out in Blurb. And so you get all the information here, and you'll see here mine is running at about $58 per cookbook, and it's about 172 pages long. So that gives you a little bit of a sense for cost. They can get pricey. Now, I did do a full wrap image, and I mean, there are decisions that you can make in the printing that would make it less expensive if I had done a soft cover or those kinds of things. But for the choices that I made, that's what mine looks like and how expensive it was. Then I let people know that the cookbook was complete. Yay! Thank them again for their contributions. If they wanted a copy of it, I sent them the direct link to be able to purchase. And then the books that I purchased for my mother-in-law, for my mother, of course, for my daughter, for me. And then one of my sisters-in-law said, well, sure, I'll share with you as long as I get a book. So I had some people like that were like, yeah, I'll give you the recipes as long as I get a copy of it. And so then I had those little books that I needed to purchase in exchange for the information that I got. And I wrapped those up for, yeah, okay, that's how I responded to, really? But yeah, really. And so I wrapped those up for them with the little gift card in the front that said, this is a book that has errors in it, and then gave them to the contributors and thanked them again. Archiving your originals. I am not good at this, and I'm just going to tell you that I'm not. And Barbara has reminded me, and since she did, I went back and I archived all the originals because I was trusting Canva to keep it safe, and I don't know why I was doing that. You can't do that. Obviously, you can't do that. And so you archive all of your originals. I have all of my original files from this first edition. Again, people are correcting things, or my mother-in-law's texting me, and I'm marking it in my book. And then you're going to start hearing from the people who didn't contribute and now want to. So yeah. So, or I had a family member that was like, wait, I have another story that really needs to go in this section. Well, the book was already printed. But I save all of that, and I've set up another electronic system of files, and I've already started just dumping stuff in there as it comes to me for a second edition. Okay, so any timing is good timing because you're still capturing family recipes, family stories, and family photos. So some other things to think on. And again, I've already kind of alluded to this. Families get defined in all different ways. The idea of the straight family tree is simply a concept we would all like to have, but don't. I mean, it would be incredibly rare to find a family tree that is actually a linear tree. And so again, I really worked based upon my recipient, which was my daughter. And so I wanted to capture the people that she considers family. So there is a nana and an aunt and a cousin in her book that are family. I mean, there's no question they're family. They're my family too, but we don't have biological or legal ties to them. They are family because of the way that we have functioned. And so it was really important to me, as it always has been with my children, to honor their ties. It's not always about biology and legalities. It's about who is with you in the trenches, who's with you at the celebrations, who are those people. And so this is, excuse me for a minute, I've got to grab a Kleenex. So this is Nana Sandra. That's what my children call her, not because I set that up, but because they were around her grandchildren and they picked it up as children. And so she is Nana Sandra. Her husband was actually raised with my dad. So it was my dad and her husband, and then she married my dad's best friend, and has always been in our family. And so my daughter will always tell you that she has 3 sets of grandparents. Well, she's including her maternal grandparents, her paternal grandparents, and her bonus grandparents. And she calls Nana Sandra. Okay. Now, I wanted to show you this. This is me, by the way, right there. This is one of my favorite pictures from back in the day when we were kids. These are her boys. I wanted to show you how I handled the family tree part of things here. So what I've done here, and makes sense to my daughter, is here is my dad. The original tie that made Nana Sandra and Papa Alvin family was between my dad and her husband, Alvin. So you see here that I've got a line here and it has the hashes through it. So the hashes are indicating that this is not a biolegal tie, it is a family tie. And then the ... indicate that Nana Sandra married Papa Alvin. Papa Alvin is tied into my daughter's papa, and then I am his daughter and she is my daughter. So that's how I chose to handle this. Here's another example. This is Cousin Jenna, and she is absolutely Cousin Jenna, has always been Cousin Jenna. And here is the tie, me, and then her mother is essentially functions as my sister and vice versa, but we're not biolegal tied. And then our daughters, and you see that I've kept it generational. So this one kind of almost ends up being a square by the time we get the girls in there. Now, I will also point out here that my daughter's not in this one, but this one is my son. So I made sure that I integrated photos in that included my other children. So for people that are important to you. Now, I had to revisit how I drew my original map, because what I found is I was intending to include spouses. I was always intending to include spouses because, you know, somebody marries your uncle and that's your aunt, and who cares? You know, it's always been your aunt, right? The kids don't care. But what I didn't account for is okay, so for Aunt Abby, for example, she had a family recipe, but it didn't start with her. It came from her grandmother, which is outside of our family. And so I had to really stop and think about how I wanted to handle it. And so what I chose to do is, well, it was her grandmother's recipe, but it's been brought into our family by Aunt Abby. So it is now part of our family legacy also. So I included those. Now, I didn't do a separate section for my sister-in-law's grandmother because that's not our family lineage. Her grandmother is in her section, but it is clearly identified as her grandmother being the origin and coming into our family through my sister-in-law, my child's aunt. And then my sister-in-law pooped out on me and I couldn't get information about her grandmother. And so I just said, forget you. And I went out to Ancestry and I found everything I need. And then when she got her cookbook, she sat and bawled and bawled and bawled and cried and wanted to know how I had found all this information about her grandmother. Because she didn't help me find it. I went and found it myself. But it was really special to her then that I had honored the lineage of the recipe that she had brought into our family. I've said this, really consider how to include family who are not cooks, photos, stories. My mother's cousin who wrote the intro part, that's how I included him because he's not a cook, but he was very close to his mother. So he wrote her stories, so on and so forth. What has the recipient written or created that you might want to include? So my daughter, is past it now, but she was writing college essays. Well, my family, my husband's and my family was built through both adoption and biology. And so my daughter has a very unique perspective on how families get built. And with the breakages in my family history, we've always talked about who you make family and that those ties may or may not be people who are biologically linked to you. Well, my daughter, unbeknownst to me, wrote that as a part of an essay that she used for a college essay. Well, of course, I've saved it and all the genealogy stuff, right? But I took excerpts of it and put it at the front of the book because it helps to foreground her cookbook that includes bio, legal, and other family that is her family, and it's her writing. Okay, so now we talk about the elephant in the room. Your family may be perfection and you have no breakages in your family. My family is not. And so I had to step back and think, okay, so when I put this out as a family cookbook, how's that going to resonate with X person because of this situation that occurred? So this is an example. Somebody who divorced from your family but growing up with children was always their aunt. Okay, it's still in their heads, it's still their aunt. They don't care about the legalities of it. So I wanted to include it in the book, but how is the divorced other half of the couple going to respond, as well as the new wife, right? So you have to think about all of these little things when you're handing out these family cookbooks. Well, one option for that is to do special editions of the cookbook, right? Well, I ain't gonna do that. Like, that's not happening on my watch. I'm doing one family cookbook, and my whole thing was, it's my daughter's family cookbook. This is her family as she sees it. You don't have to have it in your kitchen, but if you want to, great. If you don't want to, I'm completely fine with that. And I included my daughter's family, period, end of story. And I just chose not to worry about the elephants. So, but you may have situations that you do need to worry about. So I laughed whenever Barbara, reminded me I needed to do the recipe for this. And there's that whole thing about time on there. I have no idea, but it's massive. Like, this is a massive undertaking. I did not realize. And so in my head, I self-imposed this deadline of, oh, I want to have these for Christmas. Okay, so I did the whole 172 pages in 3 months. It was brutal. I really enjoyed it for a long time. And then it just became a race, of being on the couch after everybody went to bed, just working these pages and working them and working them. I don't recommend that because it took some of the joy out of the process and it was entirely self-imposed. I would recommend to you, if you're going to do a family cookbook, plan on at least a year of just consistent effort. And that way you're not under time pressure. How long will it take you? I have no idea, but a lot of time, because you don't know how long you're going to have to track somebody down. and you don't know whose storage shed you're going to be walking into because you've gotten permission to scan stuff out of their family boxes, and you don't know who's mad at who and who's going to get divorced and all that kind of stuff. So it's massive, completely worth it, but do not do it in 3 months. Materials, obviously computer scanner, and again, I used Canva, and then I used a printer that I could contact, online. This is the end of her cookbook. My daughter rides horses, and this was a rear end picture that I included at the very end, and it says the end in her cookbook, and that is the end.
Carrie, that's absolutely fabulous. I had the opportunity to get a sneak peek as we finalized the slides themselves, but I found so much joy out of that. It just, I'm verklempt, just absolutely adored that. I think the audience here is nodding heads and sharing sharing the love as well. Any last comments before I turn off the recorder and let us just engage in the conversation? Okay, then let me do that. I will stop the recording and then we'll go into our after party. You have to have been here to catch all of the good stuff as the follow-up conversation, but certainly you're always welcome to add comments into the chat here as I share the recording.